This bedtime sleep story is designed to draw you in and keep you here until the very end. Before we begin, if you think you might watch all the way through, introduce yourself in the comments. I would love to know your name. Please also like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I would love to know where you're watching from, so tell us in the comments and share what time it is where you are. Thank you once more for joining me. Get comfortable. Lie on your bed or couch. Make sure you've locked your door. Turn off the lights. Or you can put on dim lights. Don't forget to say hello in the comments. It's time to open the door to room 607. And once you've stepped inside, there's no turning back.
The rain had been falling for hours, pattering softly against the glass lobby doors of the Whitmore Plaza building. It was nearly midnight, and Jamie Carter leaned back in the creaky security desk chair, listening to the steady hum of the ceiling lights. Most people hated night shifts, but Jamie didn't mind. The quiet suited him. Besides, the pay was decent, and with the extra time he could read or jot down notes for the crime novel he'd been meaning to finish. He glanced at the monitor array in front of him. Empty hallways, darkened offices, the occasional flicker of an overhead bulb. The building was massive, a glass and steel monument in the middle of a city that never quite slept. Every half hour, Jamie was supposed to do a floor check, but the elevators made it too easy. Lately, he'd started taking the stairs for exercise, though he still couldn't make it up more than 6 flights without his legs burning. Tonight felt ordinary, until it didn't. Around 12:15 a.m., a faint metallic clang echoed through the speakers from the loading dock camera feed. Jamie frowned, leaning closer to the monitor. The dock was supposed to be locked at night, and no deliveries were scheduled until morning. He pressed the intercom button. "Hello? Anyone out there?" Nothing. Just the steady hiss of rain. Jamie grabbed his flashlight, stepping into the elevator. It rattled as it descended to the ground floor, the soft whine of cables filling the silence. When the doors opened, the dock corridor stretched out ahead, dim, shadowy, and smelling faintly of oil and wet concrete. The door to the dock was shut, but something didn't feel right. The hairs on Jamie's neck prickled as he pushed it open and stepped into the damp night air. The place was empty. No trucks, no workers. Just rain pooling in shallow puddles and running in silver streams toward the gutter. He was about to turn back when a sharp knock sounded behind him. 3 quick raps against the building door he'd just walked through. Jamie spun around, heart thudding. No one was there. The hallway beyond the door was empty, stretching toward the elevator like a tunnel. He stepped inside cautiously, shining the flashlight down the corridor. Nothing moved. No doors ajar, no echo of footsteps. A faint chill settled in his stomach. Someone had been there, close enough to knock, close enough to slip away without a sound. Jamie returned to the desk, scanning the monitors again. One camera, the one covering the north stairwell, was showing static. That wasn't possible. He reached for the radio to call building maintenance, then paused. A shadow had just flickered across the south hallway feed, moving toward the same stairwell that had gone offline. Jamie's pulse quickened. This wasn't going to be an ordinary night. Jamie kept his eyes locked on the monitor. The shadow was gone now, swallowed by the stairwell camera's static, but the unease stayed knotted in his gut. He stood, his knees brushing the desk as he reached for the flashlight again. A dozen scenarios flickered through his mind. A late-working tenant, a homeless wanderer who'd slipped in before the doors locked, or maybe just his imagination feeding on the quiet. Still, the static camera worried him. Those feeds rarely went down, and when they did, it usually meant a physical problem. A loose cable, a cut wire, or interference. Jamie took the elevator to the second floor and started down the hall toward the south stairwell. The carpet muffled his steps, and the hum of the ventilation system filled the air like a low, constant growl. When he reached the stairwell door, he hesitated, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices. Just the steady echo of rain hitting the emergency exit door at the bottom. He pushed the door open. The light was dim, flickering slightly, and the smell of damp concrete was stronger here. Halfway down the first flight, his flashlight beam caught something on the railing. A smudge, dark and irregular. He leaned closer. It wasn't dust or dirt. It looked wet. He touched it with the tip of his finger. It was sticky. Blood. His breath caught, and he instinctively glanced down the stairwell. The next landing was empty, but the air felt heavier, like someone had just been there. A sound drifted up from below. A faint metallic scrape, like something being dragged. His mind screamed at him to go back, but his feet stayed rooted. He stepped down slowly, the stairwell echoing with every footfall. The scraping stopped. He reached the third-floor landing and spotted something lying against the wall. A small, silver object. It was a key ring, the kind you'd get from a locksmith, with a single brass key attached. He didn't recognize it. A whisper of movement above made him freeze. Someone was at the top of the stairwell. He turned his flashlight upward just in time to see a figure step back out of sight, the stairwell door closing softly behind them. Jamie's pulse thundered. Whoever it was, they'd been behind him the whole time. He slipped the key into his pocket and took the next flight 2 steps at a time, determined to catch up. When he burst through the top door into the 4th-floor corridor, it was empty. But a single wet footprint smeared along the carpet led away toward the far corner.
Jamie crouched, examining the wet print on the carpet. The tread was faint, the outline blurred, but it was unmistakably a shoe. Not a boot, not sneakers, something in between, maybe a worn leather loafer. The footprint pointed toward the far end of the hallway, where the overhead light flickered like a dying candle. Jamie followed, each step slow, the hum of the building pressing in from all sides. A second footprint appeared a few feet ahead, then another, smeared into the fibers. Whoever it was had been moving quickly, maybe even running. The corridor ended at an unmarked door. Tenants rarely used it. Behind it was a short service hall that led to an old archive room no one visited anymore. Jamie knew the place well. Dusty shelves, filing cabinets from decades past, and a single window that looked out over the alley. The doorknob was cold under his hand. He turned it slowly. The door creaked open and stale air rushed out to greet him. Inside, the service hall was dim, lit only by a narrow bulb overhead. The footprints continued, darker here, more defined. The last one stopped just outside the archive room door. Jamie pushed the door open with his foot, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Rows of metal shelves lined the walls, most empty except for a few warped boxes. He stepped inside, listening for any sign of movement. Nothing. Until the flashlight beam caught something in the corner. A jacket. It was draped over a chair, as though someone had just taken it off. Beside it sat a half-empty water bottle and a folded sheet of paper. Jamie's fingers itched to unfold it, but as soon as he touched the paper, something clattered behind him. He spun around, flashlight slicing across the room. The jacket was gone. Jamie's stomach flipped. He hadn't heard anyone cross the room, hadn't heard the chair scrape. It was like it had vanished in the second he looked away. The overhead bulb flickered, dimmed, then went out completely. Jamie's flashlight beam quivered in his hand as the darkness closed in. From somewhere to his left, a low voice spoke. "You shouldn't have followed me." Jamie jerked the light toward the sound, but the beam caught only the bare wall. Footsteps pounded toward the door, and by the time Jamie reached it, the service hall was empty. No footprints, no jacket, no voice. But the folded paper was still in his hand. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. There were only 5 words written in jagged black ink. "I know where you live." Jamie's fingers clenched around the note, the edges digging into his skin. The words seemed to pulse in the dim light, their meaning hammering into his chest. "I know where you live." A bead of sweat slid down his neck. He turned the flashlight toward the archive room again, scanning the shelves, the corners, the floor, anything that might tell him where the stranger had gone. Nothing. But then he remembered the window. It was the only other way out. Jamie crossed the room quickly, boots crunching on grit. The small square pane looked out over the alley 4 floors below. Rain streaked down the glass, distorting the neon glow from a diner sign across the street. The latch was loose, not broken, just off, like it had been lifted and set back without care. He pushed it open. The alley below was empty except for a single dumpster and a pile of black trash bags. But one detail stood out. The lid was down. Jamie knew it was usually left open. The maintenance crew never bothered closing it. He aimed the flashlight down. The lid gleamed with a fresh sheen of rainwater, but the streaks running down the side told a different story. Something, or someone, had just climbed out. Jamie's thoughts spun. Whoever left the note must have dropped down into the dumpster to break their fall, then slipped away before he reached the window. He pulled back, closing the window quietly. If they were willing to risk that kind of escape, they weren't just some lost tenant. They were here for him. The note felt heavier in his pocket as he retraced his steps toward the hallway. Halfway back, his radio crackled to life. "Carter, you on your rounds?" It was Dennis, the day shift guard who lived 2 streets over. "Yeah," Jamie replied, trying to sound steady. "Why?" "Because there's a guy at the front desk asking for you. Says he's an old friend. Won't give a name." Jamie froze. "What does he look like?" Dennis paused, as though checking. "Tall, dark hair, wearing a black jacket. He keeps smiling." The jacket. Jamie's grip on the flashlight tightened. "Don't let him in." Another pause. Then Dennis's voice, low and uneasy. Carter, he's already gone." Jamie bolted for the elevator, punching the button repeatedly. The doors slid open and he stepped inside, heart slamming against his ribs. As the elevator began to descend, the overhead light flickered just once. When it steadied again, he saw something in the mirrored wall, a faint smear, shaped like a handprint, slowly fading as though it had just been pressed there. Jamie leaned back against the elevator wall, staring at the fading print. It wasn't a trick of the light. He could see each ridge and swirl in the condensation. Whoever it belonged to had been in here seconds ago, but he'd been alone when the doors opened. The elevator slowed, and his stomach knotted. The numbers above the door showed 3, not G. He hadn't pressed the 3rd floor. The door slid open with a soft chime. The hallway beyond was pitch black. No emergency lights, no flicker from the vending machine at the far end. Just blackness. Jamie's hand hovered over the closed door button, but something stopped him. The darkness felt expectant, like it was waiting for him. He stepped out, flashlight beam cutting across the walls. The air was cooler here, carrying a faint metallic tang. Every sound seemed too loud. The creak of his boots, the hum of the elevator behind him, the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. Halfway down the hall, his beam caught something on the floor. Another note. This one wasn't folded. The paper was wrinkled and damp, the ink smeared but still legible. "You're walking the wrong way." Jamie's mouth went dry. He turned slowly, scanning behind him. Nothing. The elevator doors began to close, but before they shut completely, a shape appeared in the gap. Just for an instant, a tall figure, standing perfectly still, head tilted slightly, as if listening. He stepped forward, but the doors sealed with a soft clunk. He stabbed the call button, but the elevator didn't move. A faint sound reached him then, a scrape, like shoes sliding on concrete. It came from the stairwell at the far end of the hall. Jamie approached slowly, every nerve in his body on high alert. The stairwell door was ajar, swinging slightly as if someone had passed through moments ago. He pushed it open and aimed the flashlight down. The beam caught something on the floor. The edge of a black jacket disappearing around the corner 2 flights below. Jamie's pulse surged. He took the stairs 2 at a time, the echo of his steps chasing him downward. When he reached the landing, the jacket was gone. The stairwell door to the 2nd floor was open. He stepped through and froze. In the middle of the hallway stood a chair. On it, neatly folded, was the same jacket he'd seen before. And balanced on top of it was his own apartment key. Jamie stared at the chair, his breath shallow. The jacket looked dry, untouched by rain, as if it had been waiting there for him all along. His apartment key gleamed on top, perfectly centered, like an invitation. He didn't move closer. Something about it screamed wrong, too deliberate, too staged. Slowly he circled the chair, flashlight beam sweeping the corridor. The shadows here were thicker, stretching long across the faded carpet. Every few seconds, the faint buzz of the building's wiring was interrupted by a distant tap, 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 like knuckles brushing metal. Jamie crouched low, inspecting the chair without touching it. That's when he saw it. A thin fishing line, barely visible in the light, running from the jacket's sleeve to the wall vent near the floor. He leaned closer. The line continued inside the vent, taut and waiting. Jamie's gut twisted. He didn't need to see where it led to know it was connected to something he didn't want triggered. He stepped back, heart pounding harder now. This wasn't a random stalker. This was someone who planned, who studied him. The jacket, the key, the notes. It was all choreography. The tap, tap, tap stopped. Silence settled over the hall. Then, faintly, from the vent, a whisper. "You're late." Jamie's skin crawled. He turned sharply, scanning behind him, but the hallway was empty. The radio at his hip crackled. "Carter, you there?" It was Dennis again. "I'm here. What's up?" "You're not going to like this," Dennis said, his voice low. "That guy in the black jacket? I just saw him outside the building, standing in the rain, looking straight up at your apartment window." Jamie froze. "You're sure it was him?" "Positive,"
Dennis replied. "I was about to call you when—" The radio hissed, then cut out completely. He tapped it, tried the channel, but it stayed dead. A faint creak echoed down the hall. He whipped the flashlight toward the sound. The stairwell door at the far end of the hall was now open, swaying gently. He reached for his phone, but the signal bars were gone. No calls, no messages, no way to reach Dennis. The jacket still sat on the chair, key in place, fishing line taut. He knew he should walk away. Every instinct told him it was bait, but it was his apartment key, and if this man had been at his place— He reached for it, slowly, carefully, keeping the line slack. And then, from somewhere in the vent, the whisper came again, closer this time. "See you at home." Jamie's hand froze inches from the key. That whisper hadn't been a recording. It had breath behind it, presence. Someone was speaking directly into the vent system, close enough for the words to carry like a snake sliding through the walls. He yanked his hand back and stepped away from the chair. His pulse thudded in his ears as he backed toward the stairwell, keeping the beam of his flashlight fixed on the vent. A faint tick-tick-tick echoed through the ductwork, moving away from him now, toward the lower floors. Whoever it was had slipped back into the maze of service passages. Jamie's mind raced. The key didn't matter right now. If the man had been outside his apartment window, it meant two things. He'd been there before, and he knew how to get in. The stairwell was cold and damp, smelling faintly of rust. He descended quickly, skipping steps until he reached the lobby. It was empty. The front desk was unattended, the logbook open, and Dennis's pen still resting in the crease. Jamie's stomach tightened. "Dennis?" he called. No answer. He walked behind the desk, scanning the monitors. The street cams showed the rain coming down in sheets, neon reflections shimmering in the puddles. But the corner where Dennis usually stood on smoke breaks was empty. Something moved in the periphery of the east side camera. Jamie leaned closer. A figure, tall in a black jacket, was walking slowly past the front of the building, head tilted up toward the lobby windows. Even through the grainy feed, Jamie could see the curve of a smile. Jamie snatched the lobby phone and dialed Dennis's extension. No ring. He was about to step out and confront the man when the figure stopped under the awning. Without breaking eye contact with the camera, he raised his hand and dangled something between his fingers. Jamie's stomach dropped. It was Dennis's security badge. The badge lay in a puddle, water rippling over its laminated surface. Jamie picked it up. The plastic was warm. From behind him, through the glass doors of the building, he saw movement on the lobby monitors. The man in the jacket was inside now, standing in the elevator, and the doors were closing. Jamie's legs moved before his brain caught up. He shoved through the glass doors, rainwater dripping from his hair onto the marble floor. The elevator panel glowed red, already on its way up. He jabbed at the call button, but the display told him the car had just passed the 4th floor. He didn't have time to wait for it to come back down. Jamie spun toward the stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time. His breathing turned ragged by the 3rd flight, but the thought of the man wandering the building kept him moving. He slowed at the 5th floor landing, ears straining. A faint ding echoed down the hallway, the elevator doors opening. Jamie eased the stairwell door open just enough to peek out. The man in the black jacket stood at the far end of the corridor, facing one of the apartments. He couldn't see his face, but the tilt of his head suggested listening. Jamie's stomach knotted when he recognized the apartment number. It was Mr. Winslow's, a retired teacher who lived alone and liked to bring Jamie leftover soup during winter shifts. The man raised his hand and knocked 3 slow times. Jamie stepped into the hall. "Hey!" The figure froze. Then, slowly, he turned his head. Even from this distance, Jamie saw the smile. Too wide, too calm. The man didn't speak. He simply stepped backward into the open apartment door. Jamie's pulse surged. "Mr. Winslow!" he shouted, running forward. By the time he reached the doorway, the apartment was dark. Only the faint glow of the city seeped through the curtains. Jamie edged inside, flashlight sweeping across the familiar clutter. Stacks of books, a worn armchair, the half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. No sign of Mr. Winslow. A floorbird creaked behind him. Jamie spun around, but the doorway was empty. The hall beyond was still. He stepped back toward the door, heart hammering, and that's when he saw it. On the inside of the door, scratched deep into the wood, were the words, 6 floors up. Jamie backed into the hallway and looked toward the elevator. The doors were closing again, the panel above showing the arrow up. Whoever this was, they wanted him to follow. Jamie's mind screamed trap, but his legs were already moving toward the stairwell. He pushed through, gripping the railing, his flashlight beam bouncing across the concrete walls as he climbed. The 6th floor was quiet when he arrived. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air is holding its breath. And at the far end of the corridor, a door stood open, warm light seeping out into the hallway. Inside, someone was humming. Jamie moved toward the open door, each step deliberate, the humming growing clearer. It wasn't a cheerful tune. The notes were drawn out, almost mournful, like a lullaby stretched too far. He stopped just short of the threshold and peered inside. The apartment was spotless, unnervingly so. White walls, pale carpet, not a single piece of clutter. In the center of the living room sat a wooden rocking chair, swaying gently, though no one sat in it. The humming seemed to come from deeper inside. He stepped in, the softness of the carpet swallowing his footsteps. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and something metallic underneath. He passed a bare kitchen. No dishes, no food, just empty counters. The humming grew louder, pulling him toward a narrow hallway at the back. Halfway down he saw movement. A figure stood with its back to him in a bedroom doorway. Tall, black jacket, head tilted slightly, the humming never breaking rhythm. Jamie's pulse thudded in his ears. "Where's Mr. Winslow?" he demanded. The humming stopped. The man didn't turn. He simply lifted one hand and pointed toward the bedroom. Jamie tightened his grip on the flashlight and stepped forward. The room beyond was dim, the only light coming from a lamp on the floor. Shadows clung to the corners like web cobs. On the bed lay a small, square object wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. A white card rested on top. Jamie glanced back toward the door, but the man was gone. The apartment was silent now, except for the faint creak of the rocking chair in the living room. Jamie approached the bed cautiously and picked up the card. 4 words were written in blocky handwriting. "Don't open it here." His fingers hovered over the string. He wanted to know what was inside, but the weight of the note made him hesitate. A sudden knock echoed from somewhere else in the apartment. 3 slow raps, just like before. Jamie backed toward the bedroom door, the package still in his hands. He stepped into the hallway and froze. The rocking chair had stopped moving, and sitting in it now was Mr. Winslow. His eyes were open, staring straight ahead. Jamie called his name, but the old man didn't respond. Then he noticed Winslow's lips were moving, whispering, over and over the same phrase, "He's already in your place." Jamie's grip on the package tightened. Mr. Winslow's voice was barely audible, each whisper scraping out like dry leaves in the wind. "Who?" I asked, stepping closer. Winslow's eyes didn't shift, didn't blink. "He's already in your place." Jamie's mind raced. His apartment was on the 7th floor. Whoever this was had been outside his window earlier. If Winslow was telling the truth, that meant... Jamie backed toward the door, scanning every corner of the pristine apartment. The man in the jacket could have doubled back while Jamie was here. The package felt heavier now. Its edges were hard, the shape box-like beneath the paper. He didn't know why, but every instinct screamed that whatever was inside was meant for him, and not in a good way. He slipped it into his jacket, keeping one hand on it as he left the apartment. Winslow kept whispering the same phrase, his voice fading into the distance as Jamie stepped into the hall. The elevator was still somewhere above, so Jamie took the stairwell, moving fast. The concrete echoed with each step, and more than once he thought he heard another set of footsteps, matching his pace a floor above. When he reached the 7th floor, the corridor was dim. Only half the overhead lights worked, buzzing faintly. His apartment door was closed, but the deadbolt was unlocked. He never left it that way. Jamie drew in a slow breath and pushed it open. The smell hit him first. Rainwater and something faintly burnt, like scorched paper. His living room was exactly as he'd left it, except for one detail. On his coffee table sat a steaming mug of tea. The steam curled upward in thin tendrils, proof it had been poured only moments ago. Jamie set the package down on the counter, his eyes sweeping the room. He checked the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom. Nothing. But the tea. He stepped closer. On the rim of the mug was a single dark fingerprint, still damp. From somewhere inside the apartment, behind the closed closet door, came a faint humming. The same slow, mournful tune he'd heard in the 6th floor apartment. His heart thudded as he reached for the doorknob. It turned easily. The door swung open, and the closet was empty. But on the inside of the door, written in thick black marker, were the words, "You opened it here." Jamie spun toward the counter. The package was gone. Jamie's breath caught in his throat. The package wasn't just missing. There was no sign it had ever been there. The counter was bare, bone dry, not even the faintest crease from the brown paper. But he knew he'd set it there. He remembered the sound of it hitting the surface. The humming stopped. The apartment fell into silence, so deep he could hear the faint tick of the hallway clock outside his door. Jamie backed into the living room, scanning every corner, every shadow. His eyes locked on the coffee table. The mug of tea was still there, but the steam had stopped. The liquid inside was stone cold. A noise came from the ceiling, a dragging sound. Jamie's gaze shot upward to the attic hatch in the hallway ceiling. It was slightly ajar, a thin sliver of darkness peering down at him. The dragging sound stopped. Jamie's pulse quickened. He grabbed the broom from behind the kitchen door and poked at the hatch. It swung open with a soft creak, releasing a wave of cold, stale air. Something landed on the floor with a soft thud. It was the package. The brown paper was damp now, the string frayed as if it had been gnawed. Jamie bent down slowly, his hands shaking as he reached for it. That's when he saw it. Fresh black marker across the paper that hadn't been there before. 3 words, written in the same blocky handwriting as the earlier note. "Now you can." Jamie stared at it. Every part of him wanted to throw it in the trash, maybe even out the window, but the message was clear. The man wanted him to open it. And if this was a trap, he was already deep inside it. He carried the package to the coffee table and sat down. The string came away with one sharp pull.
The paper tore easily, revealing a small, plain wooden box. No latch, no lock. He lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in black fabric, was a photograph of him, taken from outside his building, through his own apartment window. Jamie's stomach dropped. The image wasn't recent. It was from 2 nights ago. He was in the picture, asleep on his couch. But he wasn't alone. In the far corner of the frame, barely visible in the shadows, stood the man in the black jacket, watching him.
And taped to the back of the photograph was a hotel keycard, the number written on it, room 607. Jamie turned the hotel keycard over in his hand, the number 607 etched into his thoughts like a bad tattoo. He didn't recognize the design, no logo, no name, just a plain white card with the number scrawled in marker. Whoever left it wanted him to go there, which meant it was either a dead end or exactly the place he needed to be. The photograph still lay on the table, the shadowed figure in the corner watching him, even through the glossy print. Jamie slid it into his jacket pocket. Within 10 minutes, he was in his car, rain streaking across the windshield, wipers beating a steady rhythm against the night. The streets were nearly empty, just the occasional bus or late-night taxi. He drove toward the edge of town, following an address he'd found by running the card's magnetic strip through a portable reader he kept in his glove box. The reader spat out one word: Regency. The Regency Hotel sat on a block most people avoided, the kind of place where the neon sign flickered more often than it shone. The lobby lights glowed dimly behind grimy glass doors. Inside, the air was stale with the smell of old carpet cleaner and cigarettes. The front desk was unmanned, a bell sitting crooked on the counter. Jamie tapped the bell twice. No answer. He decided not to wait. The elevator groaned as it carried him upward, and each floor crawling by. When the doors opened on the 6th, the hallway stretched ahead in faded red carpet and buzzing fluorescent light. Room 607 was halfway down on the left. The door looked newer than the others, the wood polished, the handle gleaming. Jamie stood there for a moment, listening. Silence. He slid the card into the lock. The light flashed green. The door swung open on well-oiled hinges. The room was dark except for the glow from a single lamp in the far corner. The blinds were drawn tight, but the air carried the faint scent of rain-soaked pavement. Jamie stepped inside. The first thing he saw was the wall opposite the bed. It was covered, floor to ceiling, in photographs. All of him. At work, in the grocery store, walking home, sitting on his couch. Some were years old, others were from today. One of them showed him entering the Regency lobby just moments ago. Jamie turned sharply, but the hallway outside was empty. He looked back into the room. On the bed sat another package, this one smaller, wrapped in the same brown paper. A single note lay on top. Turn around. Jamie's fingers tightened around the note. Every instinct screamed at him not to do it, not to turn, not to give whoever was here the satisfaction. But the air in the room felt heavier now, thicker, like someone was breathing it with him. Slowly, he turned. The doorway was still open, the hallway beyond stretched empty and silent, the flicker of a failing light at the far end the only movement. Jamie scanned the shadows. Nothing. But when he stepped forward, his foot landed on something soft. He looked down. It was another photograph, face down on the carpet. He picked it up. The image was blurred, taken in motion, but he could make out himself standing exactly where he was right now, holding the note that told him to turn around. Jamie's stomach churned. The photo hadn't existed a minute ago. A sound came from the corner of the room. Not the bed, not the lamp, the closet. The door was shut, but a thin line of light glowed at the bottom.
A shadow moved across it. Jamie set the photo on the bed and stepped toward the closet. His hand hovered over the knob, listening. Someone was whispering inside. The words were too low to make out, but the cadence was familiar, the same murmuring Mr. Winslow had been doing. Jamie pulled the door open in one quick motion. The closet was empty, but at the back, where the wall should have been, there was only a black opening. A tunnel, maybe 3 feet wide, vanishing into darkness. The whispering grew louder from within. Jamie crouched and shined his flashlight inside. The beam lit only a few feet ahead before the blackness swallowed it whole, but he could see something resting on the floor just inside the opening. The package from his apartment, the first one. It was unwrapped now, and inside wasn't a box at all, but a small, antique mirror. In the reflection, Jamie didn't see himself in the hotel room. He saw himself back in his own apartment, standing at the window, and behind him, in the reflection, was the man in the black jacket. Jamie's pulse pounded in his ears. The mirror's glass shimmered, faintly, like there was heat behind it, but the image stayed razor sharp. His apartment window, rain on the glass, and that tall figure looming in the corner. Jamie swallowed hard and reached in. His fingers brushed the mirror's cold frame. The moment he touched it, the whispering stopped. Then, with a sound like air being sucked from the room, the mirror's image shifted. Now it showed the hotel room, but empty. No Jamie, no package. He pulled the mirror closer, his knees pressing into the closet's threshold. The frame was heavier than it looked, the wood carved with small, repeating symbols he didn't recognize. A faint knock sounded behind him. 3 slow raps.
When he looked back at the mirror, the image had changed again. It showed the hotel room from somewhere high in the corner, as if seen through a hidden camera. And there, standing exactly where he was now, was Jamie. Only his reflection wasn't holding the mirror. It was holding a knife. Jamie dropped the mirror. It landed face down on the floor of the tunnel, the image gone. A new sound replaced the silence. Footsteps in the hallway outside, slow and deliberate, moving toward room 607. Jamie grabbed the mirror again without thinking and crawled backward out of the tunnel. He was on his feet by the time the footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle began to turn. Jamie bolted for the window. 6th floor or not, he couldn't stay. He threw it open, the cold night air rushing in. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the alley below was empty. He swung a leg over the sill, just as the door to the room creaked open behind him. Going somewhere? The voice was low, calm, and far too close. Jamie didn't look back. He jumped. The impact rattled through him, but adrenaline kept him moving. He scrambled to his feet, clutching the mirror, and ran until the glow of the Regency's neon was nothing but a faint flicker in the distance. When he finally stopped, bent over and gasping for air, he glanced down at the mirror. The rain-speckled glass reflected not the alley, not his own face, but a hotel hallway. And there, standing exactly where he was now, was Jamie. Only his reflection wasn't holding the mirror. It was holding a knife. Jamie dropped the mirror. It landed face down on the floor of the tunnel, the image gone. A new sound replaced the silence. Footsteps in the hallway outside, slow and deliberate, moving toward room 607. Jamie grabbed the mirror again without thinking and crawled backward out of the tunnel. He was on his feet by the time the footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle began to turn. Jamie bolted for the window. 6th floor or not, he couldn't stay. He threw it open, the cold night air rushing in. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the alley below was empty. He swung a leg over the sill just as the door to the room creaked open behind him. Going somewhere? The voice was low, calm, and far too close. Jamie didn't look back. He jumped. The impact rattled through him, but adrenaline kept him moving. He scrambled to his feet, clutching the mirror, and ran until the glow of the Regency's neon was nothing but a faint flicker in the distance. When he finally stopped, bent over and gasping for air, he glanced down at the mirror. The rain-speckled glass reflected not the alley, not his own face, but a hotel hallway. And there, in the reflection, room 607's door was wide open. Something inside was waiting.
Inside, the lobby was still empty, the bells still crooked. The elevator doors were open, as if waiting for him. When he reached the 6th floor, the hallway was silent. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and wet concrete. Room 607's door was closed now. Jamie lifted the mirror. In the reflection, the door was still open. He took a breath, reached for the handle, and the door swung inward before he touched it. The door eased open without a sound, revealing the dim interior of room 607. Jamie hesitated on the threshold. The air inside was cool, smelling faintly of rain and something metallic, like blood left to dry. The lamp in the corner glowed weakly, casting long shadows across the carpet. The wall of photographs was gone, so was the bed. In fact, the room looked wrong. Bigger, deeper. Jamie stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him. He didn't turn around. In his hands, the mirror pulsed faintly, as if his heartbeat had bled into the frame. The glass no longer showed the room around him. It showed only a hallway he didn't recognize, narrow, lined with closed doors. From somewhere ahead, deep in the darkness of the expanded space, came slow footsteps. A figure emerged, tall, black jacket, face obscured in shadow. He stopped a few feet from Jamie, hands empty, head tilted just enough to suggest a smile. "You brought it," the man said softly, voice the same as on the phone. Jamie forced himself to meet the shadow where the eyes should have been. "What is it?" The man's head tilted the other way. A key and a window, both at once. He gestured toward the mirror. "Look." Jamie did. The image in the glass shifted again, now showing Jamie standing in room 607, holding the mirror. But in this reflection, the man in the black jacket wasn't across from him. He was standing behind him, one hand on his shoulder. Jamie's grip tightened. "I'm done playing." The man stepped forward, and in the mirror's reflection, Jamie watched himself vanish, replaced by empty air, the mirror clattering to the floor where he had been standing. The real mirror in his hands suddenly felt lighter, too light. He looked down. His hands were empty. The room around him dissolved into darkness, the lamp's glow swallowed in a single blink. He spun, but there was no door, no walls, only black. Somewhere far away, like a voice echoing down a long tunnel, came the man's final words. "You opened it here." The darkness pressed closer, thick and unyielding. Then, silence.
and the mirror lay face up on the carpet of room 607, its glass reflecting only the open door, waiting for someone else to look inside. The rain had picked up again, splattering against the cracked pavement outside the Regency Hotel. Inside, the lobby was as empty as ever, the front desk abandoned. Footsteps echoed in the hallway on the 6th floor. A young woman in a hooded sweatshirt stopped halfway down the corridor, glancing at the tarnished number plate on a door, 607. It was open just enough to show a sliver of darkness inside. She knocked once. "Hello?" No answer. She pushed the door wider and stepped in. The room was unlit, the air cool and still. Her sneakers whispered across the carpet as she walked toward the faint glint of something on the floor. It was a small, antique mirror. She crouched, brushing her fingers across the carved wooden frame. The glass was spotless, despite the dust coating everything else in the room. When she looked into it, she saw not her own face, but a man she didn't recognize, standing in a dim hallway lined with closed doors. He was smiling at her. Her breath caught. What? The man in the reflection lifted a hand and beckoned. She blinked, and suddenly she was no longer standing in room 607. The mirror lay face up on the carpet, reflecting only the open door, waiting for someone else to look inside.